Greetings, loyal listeners. You are now listening to an encore presentation of a B30 sharing session. So please stand by as the previously recorded podcast will begin shortly. Thank you once again for choosing B30 for your listening pleasure. There's this topic I'm really curious about, and I totally lack expertise in it. It's kind of serious, and to be honest, it's a really sensitive matter. And the topic is how to support or be there for someone who's experiencing a tremendous loss, tragedy, or hurt. So basically, the topic is, how do I help someone who's experienced a death in their family, or is going through a terminal illness or mental illness, or just any form of emotional distress? For starters, I don't know how you find that perfect balance where you want to show that you care, but you don't want to smother them and invade their space. But when you give them space, you don't want to give off the vibe that you're being emotionally distant. So it's just, how do you find that balance? How do you help someone who's going through stuff, going through hard times? So my first fear is, I'm going to say something stupid, or I'm going to play it safe and say something cliche like, oh, condolences, or I'm sorry. They're so widely used, they kind of lose their meaning over time because they get repeated so much, so I don't feel comfortable saying that. But if you don't say anything, it's kind of rude. Sometimes I resort to using, as much as I personally don't like it, I actually use some form of physical display of affection to show that I care. So maybe establishing some form of a physical touch, maybe a pat on the shoulder, a side hug, a full-on hug. I'm not very adequate in dealing with situations where someone's having a hard time. And luckily, I came across this article written by Leanne Penny, and she had some pretty interesting advice in terms of do's and don'ts, in terms of how to help a hurting friend. And some of them kind of surprised me. I thought people liked their space, but actually, after reading the article, she made some points that I didn't know about. But I tell you what, I wish I had read this article like a good 8 years ago, because there was a buddy of mine, his grandmother passed away, and he kind of just told me through text in a very brief way, and I did not know how to text him back. It was weird. Because, the thing with male friendships is we're not the most sensitive and thoughtful people in terms of saying something sweet and caring. And he handled the situation privately, and then they had a funeral, and it was pretty emotional for him. And then after the funeral, I didn't attend because I was still pretty young. It wasn't obligatory. But we met up afterwards, and the thing with him is he didn't sleep very well, obviously, and he didn't eat very well, too, past 48 hours. So when I met up with him, and then with a couple other buddies, we did what we thought was the best, in terms of helping him cope. And being that I was in my first or second year of university, and these other dudes, we weren't the brightest bunch, so we thought, what would be our knee-jerk reaction? Well, let's go drinking, dude. And what happened was, because he didn't sleep well, he didn't eat well, we got him super trashed, and he ended up passing out, right? And then we try to and the stupid thing was, we should have just left him there and let him sleep it off. But we had the bright idea of trying to bring him back to his room, and he kind of lives on the second floor of his home. So we're lugging this dude up these flight of stairs, and this guy's built like a tank, right? And when he's passed out and having a good sleep, it was like lugging bricks or cinder blocks. It was not fun. And we smashed his head a couple times on the staircase, so then he would make noises, and then we woke up his parents. Oh, it was awful. And then we told white lies oh, we were borrowing a DVD. We're gonna watch DVD, pull an all-nighter sleepover. Oh man, that was horrible. Yeah, don't handle the situation like I did, folks. Please don't. Concussion and whatnot. And what's funny is it kind of accomplished the purpose, because the next day he was all hungover and sick and throwing up. He technically didn't have time to think about his own deceased grandmother. Take it for what it is. In a sense, I did accomplish the mission somewhat, but the thing that remains is I didn't directly address his pain or hurt. I just danced around it, and it was just kind of implied amongst dudes that I kind of cared by, getting you drunk and getting you super hungover and sick the next day, which once again, in hindsight, is pretty stupid. But in my defense, the foundation of male friendships is built on hypermasculinity and avoiding emotional vulnerability. So we're talking dude bros hanging out, it's about sports, video games, and penis and fart jokes. But when you start tapping into emotions and feelings, that's when it gets uncomfortable. And let's be honest, it just gets too real. With that being said, that's why the article by Leanne Penny was really helpful, because it was time for me to grow up and actually break out of that North American cycle of social conditioning where hypermasculinity doesn't always work and you need to grow up and get in touch with your whole inner self, so to speak. Well, for starters, saying nothing to a friend when they're hurting or going through some tragedy or tremendous loss, the worst thing you can do is not saying the wrong thing. The worst thing you can do is saying nothing, which I thought was fairly interesting, because when you say nothing, you're kind of indirectly saying that the friendship isn't strong enough to break through that awkwardness, and that you rather your friends suffer in silence and alone than to break the awkwardness. So that makes sense. When you say nothing, you're basically saying the friendship isn't strong enough to break through awkwardness and address the pain. But my kind of common sense thing is, it kind of varies from person to person. Maybe they want some space first. Maybe you can kind of break the silence later. But I'm not sure how to apply that kind of statement. But saying nothing is far worse than saying the wrong thing. And also, when you say nothing, you're also kind of commenting that your friendship with your friend is kind of shallow and that you're only available to him or her when life is easy, which is a pretty strong point. Good times, you're a text away or a phone call away, but when stuff hits the fan, you're kind of like, not available. But I guess it's all a timing issue, knowing when to say something as opposed to not saying nothing. But I kind of get the point. What else does article say? Oh, she offers 3 very practical tips that you can apply in any situation if you have a friend or family member who's going through some really tough times. Suggestion number 1, don't stay silent. Okay, I can do that. But what exactly do I say? Well, Penny suggests the phrase, I don't understand, but I'm so sorry and I'm here. Okay, that's pretty helpful, because what's the worst cliche you can say? Oh, I know what you're going through? That's just horrible. It just rolls off the tongue, and it's just the first thing that comes to mind is, oh, I know what you're going through, hang in there. Don't say that, but don't stay silent. Penny suggests the phrase, I don't understand, but I'm so sorry, and I'm here. That's suggestion number 1. Don't stay silent. Suggestion number 2, be specific with your support. One of the worst things you can say to a hurting person is, can I do anything for you at the moment? Be specific. What that means is, if the person's not a real good cook, offer a specific meal on a specific night. Person has children, offer childcare. If the person's like bawling their eyes out, just barricaded themselves in a room, show that you care by helping them clean the house or do some yard work. The bottom line that Penny wants us to think about is, think about what your practical needs will be if you found yourself in a time where you're suffering, you're worrying, and you're struggling. And another claim she made is, don't be afraid to step up and ask, because sometimes when someone's hurting, as much as they want their space, they're actually being prideful to ask for help. However, when you kind of tempt them with these specific offers like a meal, childcare, housework, yard work, helping them look after a pet or whatever, you actually kind of slowly chip away at their guarded self, and maybe they'll be persuaded and be open to you helping. So don't stay silent, be specific with your support. The third thing that Penny brought up was, don't make the mistake of thinking things will be okay in a week. In other words, be that person who will still check up on your hurting friend in a month's time, in 6 months' time, or even in a year. Not a one-time fix. Be a friend, be thoughtful, be consistent, be there from start to finish. That's Penny's article on how to help a hurting friend. I found it quite helpful, and something that I'm going to think about. But as much as I hate to admit it, after reading the article, that cliche that people say, oh, there's meaning in suffering, as much as I hate to admit it, that phrase is kind of true after reading this article. Because when someone close to you is miserable and going through something awful, as much as it's an awful thing, it's actually an opportunity to answer a call or challenge to make something meaningful and impactful in someone's life. Who knows, if you stick around and you help your friend through it or be a part of the healing process, ideally you not only grow as a person and you grow together with each other, ideally from a Christian perspective, it also brings you closer to God. It's kind of like this spiritual growth process that you tap into when you help a friend. Before this gets any more painfully awkward and uncomfortable for me. I guess it's time to sign off. But just remember, if you're a young person, haven't gone through much in life, you ever go through that scenario where a friend goes through a loss, it's time to abandon that idea that you need experience to offer comfort to someone. And I guess that's one of the main themes or main messages I got from this article. So thank you for listening, and goodbye.